Okay, there you go. Okay, so we are coming to the last part of the the legend of Rabbi Joseph de la Reina, and I'm going to share the screen so we can look at the story. And there we are. And we are up to, first of all, I'm going to make it bigger. And we're over here someplace. And here we are. So we got to this paragraph right here. That after, multiple stops along the way and hesitances on the part of these very sacred beings, whether human or angelic, to try to warn Rabbi Yosef not to do what he's doing. He got the information about what to do, and he's climbing up Mount Seir, the mountain where he's going to encounter Samael, right? The Prince of Darkness, Satan, the evil one. And they have everything ready to hold on a second. They have everything ready to, okay, thank you very much, but now get out of here. Okay, they have everything ready to mount their final assault. So let's start it again from this paragraph here. There they found a crater in the mountain. Okay, who's going to read for us today?
I read last week. I'll give it up to somebody else.
All right, Carney's ready.
I even have a printout, so.
And he has a printout. Let's hope that it's the same thing.
Let's hope so. There they found a crater within which were several ruins, from where they heard dogs barking. They entered one of the ruins where they found two great black cowering dogs, a male and a female. When they approached, the dogs leaped at them to rend them. But Rabbi Yosef had the plates in his hand. Sensing at once that these dogs were Samael and Lilith, he stretched out his right hand and set one plate upon the neck of the male dog, and with his left hand with the left hand set the other on the neck of the female. His disciples had the ropes ready in their hands and tied them up with something upon them.
With the plates upon them.
Plates upon them, yes. As soon as they
realized... so wait, let's stop for a second. So okay. The plates have the divine name on them, and they are, and in that sense, holy and also magical, and they neutralize the power of the evil one. And here we have Samael, that's the male devil, and Lilith is his female counterpart. And there are many, many legends about Lilith from the beginning of the story of Genesis. Right now, we're not going to go into it, but they are a couple, just like the Holy Blessed One and Shekhinah are a couple. So they're just simply the dark reflection. And now they were predicted to be these fierce dogs, black dogs that would be hiding out there and would attack them. And successfully they are subdued. The dog tags, so to speak, are put onto their necks, and now they're all with ropes and tied up. They're all now neutralized. Okay.
As soon as they realized what had befallen them, they put off the shapes of dogs and put on their own shapes, like that of humankind, except that they had wings that were full of eyes like flames. They entreated and begged Rabbi Yosef to give them food and water, but Rabbi Yosef refused, as he had been commanded.
Okay, so here we have this kind of mythic description of what they look like. They take on one shape or another shape, but in this case, they take on a human shape. They look like a man and a woman, but they've got these fiery, flamy wings that are full of eyes. What do you think that means? What kind of impact, or what kind of effect, or how did we come up with this idea that a really scary demonic being should have that kind of feature? I mean, we're not talking here about horns, we're not talking here, I mean, the fire part we're used to, right?
Mhm. Well,
What's the eye?
could it be that they can see everything that there is, the panopticon, so to speak?
Right. The panopticon means everybody, everyone is under surveillance. Everybody's being watched. Everybody can be seen. Pan, across everything. Opticon, see the seeing the machine of everybody. So Big Brother is watching. So it's actually an idea that is pretty scary. We have in the morning prayers, a person should always be reverential of heaven, whether in public or in hiding, because God can see everything. Don't think that God can't see you. So the idea of actually being full of eyes is also an attribute that is used to describe God. God is clothed with a garment that's full of eyes because God is watching everywhere. But guess what? Equally, these guys are watching everywhere. And because they're out to take advantage of every single thing that they can. But meanwhile, they're hostages, or they're captive, and they're begging and begging Rabbi Yosef to give them food and water, and he has been told before, don't give in to them, so he doesn't.
Then Rabbi Yosef and his disciples set out on their way, rejoicing in good cheer with bright faces, while Samael and Lilith and all their hosts sat weeping. Rabbi Yosef rejoiced, and his mind was at ease. And he said, who could have believed our story? Upon this day, the heavens will be joyful and the earth rejoice. And Samael responded, indeed, we are in your hands, for you do whatever you desire, but let some little thing be given to us to maintain our spirits. Otherwise, how can we exist?
Till we come there.
Till we come here. But Rabbi Yosef answered, I shall give you nothing.
Okay, so they're on their way to the final judgment, and Rabbi Yosef and his disciples are just so proud of themselves and so satisfied and so happy. They accomplished what they were told they would never be able to accomplish. They were told and warned, no, you can't do this. It's too terrible. It's too hard. It's too risky. And they did it. They actually did it. So they're on their way. And then Samael says, yes, you win. But meanwhile, how are we going to be able to get there? We're famished. We're falling apart. If we don't get some kind of nourishment, we'll never make it. We'll never make it to the judgment. So, but as he was commanded, before, he doesn't give in.
When they approached Mount Seir, Rabbi Yosef took a pinch of frankincense and smelled it. Samael said, if you do not give me any food, let me at least sniff a little of this frankincense of yours. Then Rabbi Yosef stretched out his hand and gave him a few grains of the frankincense he had. And Samael blew a spark of fire from his mouth, and it burned the incense while Rabbi Yosef was still holding it.
Okay, so here we have it. The little innocuous, supposedly, but actually very innocuous mistake, right? So Samael wheedles Rabbi Yosef into agreeing, look, I'm not going to give you anything. I'm not asking you for anything substantial. I'm not asking you for anything that's physical, but just let me smell a little bit of that that good smell that you have from that spice. So Rabbi Yosef apparently thinks, what could that be? It's not. I'm not giving him anything to eat. I'm not giving him. There's no calories here, right? So that should be okay. So he gives it to him, and then Samael blew a spark of fire from his mouth and burned the incense, while Rabbi Yosef was still holding it. What does that mean?
He turned on him.
Well, what does that mean? He turned on him. What does that have to do with burning the incense?
Because by burning the incense, because if I glanced ahead, that it gave him something, and it gave him the calories or whatever it was for him to fight back.
So why does that burning the incense give him back his power? The answer is because burning incense is a biblical way of worship. Right? We have burning the incense in the temple. We have a special altar. We have an altar where we slaughter the animals and we give all our sacrifices. But then inside the temple, that's on the outside. That's in the courtyard where the public worship of God happens. That's on one altar. But then inside, in the secret place of the temple that nobody's allowed to go into except for the priests, there's an altar of incense. And that incense is burned every day as a way of serving God, of worshiping God. If you take that way of worshiping God and you apply it to demons, then you are guilty of idolatry. You're guilty of betraying God. So what we have here is Rabbi Yosef is holding on to the frankincense, holding on to the to this little spice, and Samael has tricked him into now being guilty of creating a fire of incense for the demon rather than for God. So this is that, and every time something like that is done in the real world, whenever we do what's wrong, that gives power to the devil. Every time we sin, every time we commit a crime, every time we do something horrible, that strengthens the forces of evil. So
it's reach nichoach, I guess, right?
Reach nichoach means a pleasing smell, and that's applied to sacrifices as well as to the incense in the Bible. But the incense is exactly that. It's not the sacrifices. It's its own thing. It's its own kind of worship. So here, Rabbi Yosef has been duped and manipulated so that now he has done this terrible thing. And the vapor is now this vapor of the burning incense. So it's not just a neutral smell of a nice smelling spice, but it's the smell of the burning incense that Samael has created for his own sake. So now the vapor entered.
Before we get there, I don't know if there's a connection or not, but I noticed that earlier in the story, Rabbi Yosef and his band were told to smell spices rather than eat.
Right. And that's what we do on Saturday night when Shabbat is over. And we are marking the difference between Shabbat and the rest of the week. And we smell some spices. You know, one of the traditional explanations is because it's like smelling salts. We're feeling faint. We've lost a sacred part of our soul, the Shabbat soul. So now we're going into the regular week diminished. So we need to restore our spirit with the spiritual exercise of not eating. That's physical, but smelling an aroma is something that you can't see. You can't see the aroma. And by imbibing it, you're taking it into your spirit, right? So here, Samael is doing the opposite for the sake of evil. Yeah. Okay, so the vapor.
The vapor entered Samael's nostrils, and he snapped the bonds and ropes, and he flung the leaden plates from him, and he and his host began striking the disciples. 2 of them died at once upon hearing the mighty roar
Of Samael
and his hosts, while the 2 others were stricken and went out of their minds.
Okay, so the whole thing now is a disaster, and Samael has got his strength back, and he's broken his shackles. God's name no longer holds sway over him because he has canceled it by using this idolatrous ritual, and now people are either being killed or they go crazy.
It sounds similar to Samson, where he got his strength from his hair, and when it was cut, he didn't have strength, but when his hair grew back, he got his strength back.
And here we have, here we have Samael with his strength back, and look at what he does with it. Right. Go ahead.
Rabbi Yosef remained alone with a single disciple, weary and exhausted and astonished, for he did not know that he had risked his soul when he gave the incense to the demon who turned it into vapor, and thus unwittingly was engaged in idolatry, thereby bringing all the holy forces in the leaden plates to naught.
Okay, so that's what, as we explained before, this was this huge mistake. You can't make a bigger mistake than that. And after all of that struggle, it has come to nothing.
And at that very moment, the whole mountain began to smoke amid gloom and darkness, and a voice was heard saying, "Woe unto you, Yosef, and woe to your soul, because you did not observe what you were commanded, but engaged in idolatry and offered incense to Samael. For now he will pursue you to drive you out of this world and the next."
Okay, so the voice comes out and says, "You blew it, right? You should have followed your directions, and you didn't." There's a well, we'll read one more paragraph, and then I want to do another comment. Go ahead.
The single disciple remained together with Rabbi Yosef, weary and exhausted and weak, reaching the very gates of death. They stayed there under a tree and rested. Then they buried the two disciples. The demons had obsessed the other two who fled and finally came to the city of Safed, where they soon perished, and of the pains which demons inflicted upon them.
Okay, so that's the end of this part of the story. Thankfully, the two disciples that died were brought to burial, and the other two that went crazy come to Tzfat, the city of the Kabbalists, and they finally perish. And meanwhile, now we have Rabbi Yosef and his one sole disciple, as we will, we'll get to that later. But I wanted to point out that this story is, it's part of a whole ancient chain of stories, of the hero that makes one mistake, right? The hero that just has one, he's at the brink of doing something wonderful and important, but there's just one little failing that happens and it brings everything crashing down. In the Greek world, this was always attributed to hubris, right? That the person starts believing in himself a little bit too much, and then loses his grip on the carefulness that he has to employ in order to be able to accomplish the mission. So that's happening here a little bit also. But there's also a classic precedent that would reverberate for people in the Jewish tradition, that this story has an important kind of affinity with, and it has an affinity in a way that's very Jewish. The story that I'm thinking of, well, before I say what I think, does anybody else have a possible parallel kind of story? Anybody can think back to, let's say, biblical times, where a story like this might, it's not exactly, but a parallel kind of thematically similar story.
I'll take a guess at Ruth and Naomi.
What about it? How is that?
Because Ruth wouldn't leave Naomi, and the disciple is not leaving Rabbi Joseph.
Okay, so that's an interesting. So this disciple is loyal to Rabbi Yosef, and that's a good thing. I'm talking about focusing on the hero and the failure of the hero. Where do we have?
I have one, Rabbi.
Where do we have a story? 1 second, yeah, a second. Of somebody who's on the brink of accomplishing something really major, and then somehow they blow it.
Rabbi?
Moses?
Wait.
Yeah.
I think David wanted to say something.
Yeah, that's it. It's Moses. Speak to the rock.
Okay, so there's an
told to
example. Okay, so there's an example, but there, it's not such a good parallel because in the end, the Moses story, he was supposed to get water out of the rock by speaking. He hid it instead. Let's say that that's the story. He doesn't fail to get water out of the rock. The Israelites need the water, and the Israelites get the water. The failure ends up only affecting him. He has to pay the price, and he, according to one way of reading that whole story, he no longer is able to enter the promised land, right? But actually, he accomplishes the mission with regard to the rest of the children of Israel. The rest of the children of Israel are dying of thirst, and he gets them the water, so he succeeds. The more direct parallel is Saul and Amalek. Saul was the first king of Israel, and he is given the commission, and that's where we don't quite have it here as well. Here Rabbi Yosef gives himself the commission, but Saul is given the commission to go out and fight Amalek and wipe them out. Now there is a certain kind of and Saul is very he doesn't want to be a king. He doesn't want to. He's a very shy guy. Anyway, he goes into battle against Amalek. He succeeds in defeating Amalek. But then what happens at the end of the story? Does anybody remember? He doesn't kill the king of Amalek. He has Rahmanas. He has Rahmanas on the animals, and he has Rahmanas on the king. He says, once I've defeated him, what do I have to kill him for? And then Samuel comes with God's instruction and said, who asked you to make these decisions on your own? I told you exactly what to do, and you didn't follow what I said to do exactly. And as a result, you didn't defeat evil, and therefore you lose your right to be king. So that's an example where not only is the leader himself a failure, but the mission is not accomplished. And that's, I think, a closer parallel to here. Samael is the evil one, and Amalek is the earthly representative of Samael. And the sin is a little too much compassion, right? A little. What does Rabbi Yosef de la Reina actually do? He says, "All right, what the heck? What's it going to hurt? I'll give him a little sniff of the spice. Should I be such a cruel person?" And yet the answer was yes. In terms of fighting Samael to the death, you have to be that cruel, and he was incapable of doing that. And now, and the same thing with Saul. Saul was incapable of doing that fight to the end, right? So we have, I think, a similar example. And what's Jewish about it is this idea of the tragedy of the place of compassion in the story, because we always advocate compassion. We always want people to be compassionate. We want people to have a heart. We want people to treat people, others, with goodness, with mercy, with forgiveness. So that's part of the tragedy of these stories, that even though that is an ultimate value, in this particular specific do or die quest, which Rabbi Yosef de la Reina has been told, don't do it. Don't get into it. He fails because he's got that all too human sense of softness that he brings about at the wrong time. So that's I think part of the tragedy of this part of the story. But that's not the whole end of this story. Now let's see what happens to conclude.
So after these events, Rabbi Yosef came to the city of Sidon, where he settled and turned to evil ways. Since he saw that his intention had not succeeded, and particularly since he had heard the said voice, he gave up all hope of the world to come and made a covenant with the malicious Lilith and handed himself over to her so that she became his wife. He polluted himself in every way possible, using the holy names and other names and conjurations that he knew in order to do evil. Every night he would conjure spirits and demons to fetch him whatever he might desire.
Okay, so here we have the tragedy now in its full playing out. This great
I just saw the text.
mystic and this very righteous and holy person who really almost was able to save the entire world from the depredations of the devil. When he fails, it destroys him spiritually. It completely takes away all of his righteousness, and he feels, defeated and cynical and defeatist. He heard that voice of heaven saying that, oh, you blew it, you didn't listen to me, right? That's what it says earlier, that the voice said, woe unto you, Joseph, woe to your soul. You did not observe what you were commanded, right? So now he will pursue you and drive you out of this world and the next. So that's Samael, to drive you out of this world and the next. Samael now has an opening to pursue you. And what is Rabbi Yosef de la Reina's response to this? Total collapse. Total collapse, right? This person who was so intrepid and wouldn't take no for an answer and wouldn't, take anybody's warnings to heart, he was going to go all the way. And now when that failure happens to him, he just completely gets emptied out of all of his real spirit, and he goes to the dark side. He goes to the dark side. So I'm not that conversant in Star Wars mythology, but it sounds to me like, if I recall correctly, there is something vaguely like that, right? Didn't Darth Vader once upon a time was a good guy, and then he went to the dark side or something like that?
That's right.
Okay, everybody else says that's right also, I hope. Okay, yeah. So this is the mystery of this guy who was once so good. He was the good knight, with a K, right? He was the warrior fighting God's battle. And then because he gets knocked off his horse, he then says, forget it. Okay, it's not worth a thing.
Can I sing, Rabbi? It's Josie.
Josie, yes. What do you have to say?
He's an extremist. When
Uh-huh.
he's for good and for righteousness, he's so far committed that he doesn't listen to anybody. And then when he fails, he goes deep the other way. So his nature is to be extreme.
Right. A good point, right? So and that's what they warned him about at the beginning. Just lead a good, nice, righteous life in your world and stop trying to pursue something beyond your reach. But that didn't happen. So, and that's where we also have, so here's a kind of the hubris of righteousness, right? A hubris that's not also very Jewish, that it's all in the pursuit of goodness and holiness, and yet it's a hubris. Don't even be an extremist about this, right? So here he is, and he's polluting himself, and he now has a consort, the female Satan,
Right.
Lilith, and that's he's engaged in all kinds of filth and disgustingness. Okay,
All right.
here we go, Carney.
Right. This was his practice for many a day, until more than all other women he came to love the wife of the king of Greece. And he had her brought to him almost every night. And in the morning, he would give orders to take her back.
Okay, so
One
this
day-
is, remember, so he's in Sidon. So he's in, what's now Lebanon, right? He's on the coast there of the Mediterranean, and Greece is halfway across the Mediterranean. And but he has come to, because he's a magician now. He's a demon. He's involved with demonic forces. He sees everything, and he's a kind of a demonic, Don Juan, and he engages in all kinds of perversions and so on. And he wanted now the Queen of Greece. By the way, what does Joseph de la Reina mean? Joseph of the Queen, right? That's how he gets his name. It's not that he came from some place called Reina. Reina is, the Queen. So, so he now conceives a passion for the wife of the king of Greece, the queen of Greece, and he demonically transports her every night so that he can sleep with her. And then he sends her back, and so that when she wakes up back in her bed in Greece. Go ahead.
One day the queen said to the king, "Every night in my dreams I find myself in a certain place where a certain man sleeps with me. But in the morning I find myself in my bed without knowing how it comes about." When the king heard this, he summoned the magicians and set them on guard in the queen's house. That night, the demons came by on the order of Rabbi Yosef, but the guardians noticed them at once and performed their works and conjured them in order to know what this was and how it came about. And the demons stated, "We are sent by Rabbi Yosef, who lives in Sidon." Immediately, the king sent a certain minister with letters and a gift to the Lord of Sidon, asking that Rabbi Yosef should be sent to him. Rabbi Yosef realized that his
To
deeds
be
were
sent to
known.
him alive. You skipped a line.
Should be sent to him alive at once in order that vengeance might be executed upon him.
Right. In order that vengeance might be executed is his own motivation, but that's not what he's sending. He doesn't send to Rabbi Yosef if that's what he wants to do. He's just inviting Rabbi Yosef to come, right? That's his secret plan. Go ahead.
When Rabbi Yosef realized that his deeds were known and evil had finally fallen upon him, then even before the letter reached the Lord of Sidon, he went and threw himself into the sea and died. As for me, the fifth disciple, I was left alone on a sickbed all my life, and there is no remedy for my ailment, nor do I have any reprieve from the demons. I have written this tale for a memorial.
Right. So now we know that last guy that survived the attack of all the disciples, he's the one who says that's how we're going to know the story. I'm going to tell you the story because I was there the whole time. And of course, I have to pay the price myself. But now we have, as I said, here's the tragic end of Rabbi Yosef. He is finally found out. And when he hears that he is found out, he commits suicide. Right? He finally realizes that the jig is up and that everything that he has become is repugnant and disgusting. He has given himself over to the devil, and he doesn't want to live anymore. So he jumps into the ocean. That's the tragedy of Rabbi Yosef de la Reina, sometimes called the Jewish Faust. Any reflections, any comments that people want to share about the whole story that we have here?
The ending has echoes for me of the end of the book of the end of Moby Dick and the reference to Job. And I alone survived to tell the tale.
Yeah, right. But how would we get that story of Moby Dick, to be recorded for sure?
Right, that's an archetypal story too. That
right,
only
right,
survivor remains to tell the tale.
Right, he's and there it's not so clear how much damage the survivor really has to endure for the rest of his life. I mean, to a certain extent, the message of the book is this is a tragedy, and witnessing it is no simple thing. I mean, here we have it much in a more, just obvious way. This disciple says, the demons are on me all the time. I have no reprieve, but I want to make sure that everybody else gets the warning, right? So I'm writing it down. If I can do nothing else of any value, at least let me write down the story so that other people should be chastised and chastened by the story. Yeah. So what if we had to think about this Rabbi Yosef? So Josie was talking about his kind of tendency to extremes. Anything else that we can say? When he commits suicide, is that a noble act?
No.
Is that a redemptive act, or is that just more of the same? The guy has lost it completely.
It's definitely, I don't believe it's a noble act.
Okay, Carol goes first, and then we'll see who else wants to talk. Go ahead.
I don't think it's a noble act. I think I think he's scared about what could happen, and he'd rather take his own life than be possibly tortured and everything like that, which would be more excruciating. But one of the things, and this might be off on a tangent, Rabbi, that to be buried in to be buried in a cemetery, they don't allow people who committed suicide to be buried in a unholy land. So I guess he figured he didn't deserve it.
Right. So back in those days, suicide was definitely stigmatized. That suicide was a bad thing to do. So yes. And of course, he's jumping into the sea. He's not going to get buried anyway. He's going to get swallowed up by the sea.
Which makes me think is why he did it that way as opposed to another way.
So let me put it again. So his then saying, you know what, I don't deserve to be buried in a kosher cemetery. Look at what I've done. Is that any kind of tshuva? Is there any repentance here, or is he just trying to run away from the fact that he was caught?
I think he just wants to run away.
Okay, anybody else? Somebody else was talking before. Josie?
Rabbi, I haven't got a computer. Is that law in Jewish law still enforced that you can't be?
No, God forbid. No, and across the board, even in the traditional society, we now see suicide as, an expression of mental anguish, and that a person who does that is not freely choosing to be angry, to defy God and to be a bad person. They're finding life, unbearable, and we have to have compassion. And that in that case, we do have compassion. That's part of what the story brings up. When do you have compassion, and when don't you? And here we have this one tiny little, exceptional case, which almost none of us will ever have to deal with, that you shouldn't have compassion. But the flip side of that is, so that means every other case, you should have compassion. So
the other thing that, this brings up for me, I don't know if Geraldine's on this call because I don't have my computer, but she and I heard a rabbi speak one time at the all-night study session that the reason Jews are forbidden to look into black magic is because they recognize it has power, not because it's against God's will, but because it can be powerful. And that's what this story seems to say to me, that all this black magic stuff he did, a lot of it worked. It was powerful.
Yeah. So I think we talked about this, early on with the story, that there are many views in Judaism about magic and about demonism and stuff. And somebody like Maimonides would say it's all a bunch of baloney and superstition and get over it. And the reason that the Torah says you should not engage in magic is because it's a waste of time and it's an insult to God. But other pious Jews, and this story comes out of that culture, believed that black magic and magic was real, and that all of this stuff was really real. And the reason God said, don't engage in magic, is because God is telling you not to jeopardize your life and you're not to jeopardize your soul. So God is looking out for you, and don't play with fire. It's not your imagination, it's real fire. So yes, this story definitely takes seriously all of the demonic dimensions of life, and you can, you play with the matches at your own risk, right? These are really, really dangerous. And, Rabbi Yosef, in the end, brings about his own destruction and the destruction of all his disciples, right? They went on this noble quest, and they believed in him, they trusted in him, they did everything in their power to be pure and holy, and because of his failure, they all died. So of course that's very sad. I want to argue back a little bit to play not devil's advocate, but to play God's advocate maybe, and say I think that there is a tinge here of sadness in what happens with Rabbi Yosef. I can imagine, and of course this is all our imaginations, I can imagine him at that point seeing himself with his old eyes of what he once was and what he had lost and what he had done, and feeling so remorseful, but also knowing that there was no going back. What's he going to do? He's going to apologize to the families of the disciples that he destroyed. He's going to apologize to the world. I could have, saved everybody from the devil, but then I was too stupid and I didn't do it. He knows that what he has done, there's no going back from. But I think I would see a glimmer in his, putting an end to it all. Perhaps there was this glimmer of regret and of repentance, and of saying to himself, you know what, I cannot go on. I cannot go on. Who knows? Well, it's up to each and every one of us to think about that. I'm going to now, we have a while more, and I saved another short story about bringing the Messiah that I felt would be appropriate to add to this. So I'm going to now hit share screen again. And now I've got another story. Okay. So this I don't need. And this I don't need. So, and this I don't need. So can everybody see this, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto? Can everybody, yes, okay, good. Okay, so this is now the story. I'm going to see if we can just make it a little bigger. No, that's too small, big. Okay. There. Okay. So this is a story. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto was a figure, as you see, from the first half of the 18th century. He died relatively young. He was an extraordinary person. He was, from a young age, recognized as very special. He was a Kabbalist, but he also was a literary figure. And modern Hebrew literature nods to him. He created plays that were performed. So he has this very interesting kind of mix of being a super mystical leader, and at the same time being involved in the arts, so to speak. And he also wrote the greatest classic of Jewish ethical literature called Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Just, so which is an ethical primer. I'm gonna, just for a half a second, this is, so it's not very, you can see it's a little nothing. This is actually the copy that my father studied from. So it's falling apart already. There it is, Mesilat Yesharim. Anyway, and what it does is it tries to instruct people step by step how to lead an ethical life. It's a classic. So he had a group also of disciples that Ramchal, that's how he's called, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto from Italy, and they were devoted to him and followed everything that he did. So here's the story taken from a biography or a study of about him by a modern scholar. So who's going to continue reading? Is that going to be Carney? All right, go. Can you read it? Can you see it?
The story begins by saying that once on Chol HaMaod Pesach, Ramchal asked of his disciples to choose 20 men to serve with absolutely total dedication, Misrut Nefesh, for the sake of the entire community of Israel, Klal Israel. This so that he might begin with them together to work on bringing the arrival of our righteous Messiah.
Okay, so again, that's the point. This is another attempt by another deeply spiritual figure to see if we can finally bring redemption and end all of the world's suffering. So he's going to use a select group of people to do this.
After the 20 men were chosen, he transmitted to them mystical intentions, kavanot, and unifications to work with in proper order until the holiday of Shavuot. And on that holiday eve, they came to him and said, "Our Rabbi, we have done all that you commanded us." And then he said to them, "Very good. But know that the spiritual labor up till now was merely a preparation for the work." And he gave them a new set of labors, Seder Avodah, to do until the 15th of Av, Tu B'Av. On Tu B'Av, a new set of labor was given to them to do until Rosh Hashanah. And after that, a new set of service for the 10 days of repentance. For all the other labors were but preparations for it. For if you preform and complete this set of service also,
It could be perform. Hold on.
perform, right,
All right.
then I would hope that the blessed God will bring our righteous Messiah.
Okay, so we have a little bit of a similarity in the story with Yosef de la Reina, and here there's this step-by-step a set of more and more difficult preparations, new preparations, purifications, getting closer and closer to a state of being that would then allow these people to be the instruments for the redemption. So they keep on going. This is from Passover now, and now we're all the way, 6 months later, a half a year later after Rosh Hashanah.
After they completed this set of spiritual service as well, Ramchal said, "For Yom Kippur, I will give you a few kavanot, but just prepare yourselves so as not to leave from the study hall for those entire 24 hours of Yom Kippur. But if even one of you leaves to go outside on Yom Kippur, all the work will be nullified." In other words, at that point, the brunt of the work moved over to Ramchal himself, and the main object of the disciples was to lend assistance by their continuous presence, similar to a directive found in the protocols of the Fellowship of Ramchal.
Right. So Ramchal now says, okay, you've really worked so hard. You've gotten to this very, very special spiritual place. I'm not going to ask much more of you. But now I just need you to be here. I need you to be in the synagogue on Yom Kippur and not to leave. Right? This is a sense of dedication. When the priests in the Torah are dedicated to become Kohanim, to become priests, for 7 days, they are told they can't leave the temple. So here, for 1 day on Yom Kippur, he says, I want you not to go out at all from the study hall, the Beit Midrash, which is where they prayed and where they studied. And that's what I need for you. The rest is on me.
However, on Yom Kippur, in the middle of the prayers, and especially during the Musaf prayer, they saw how a great wind was in the city. The wind was so strong until it actually split mountains and sashed boulders.
Should be slashed.
Slashed or smashed. And
Smashed. Yeah, good. Smashed. I like that.
smashed boulders until most of the city was destroyed by the wind. Here it's appropriate to mention that such a storm is documented in other writings and in barometric readings of the period.
Okay, that's an editorial comment by Jonathan Garb, the person who's writing this retelling of the story, that there really was, we know actually, that at that particular year, there really was some kind of really, really terrible, weird storm, and it's happening on Yom Kippur. So of course, there's a little distraction going on, isn't there?
A mighty wind.
Yeah.
After Musaf, Ramchal took off his talit and kittel and left the study hall. And when he returned, he said to his disciples that they should no longer focus on those intentions that he had transmitted to them, and that they...
Hold on a second. I'm trying to... It says here that somebody is waiting to get in, but I can't figure out how to do it. I'm going to try it again. Oh, okay, I got him. Okay, good. So now, okay, so Musa, so after, let's start, I'm sorry, I couldn't pay attention. Go ahead, after Musaf.
After Musaf, Ramchal took off his talit and kittel and left the study hall. And when he returned, he said to his disciples that they should no longer focus on those intentions that he had transmitted to them, and that they should cease the entire order of the service in this matter. for now the Messiah would not come from this service. And he warned them that if they did not obey him to stop these intentions and the whole order of worship, then they would all be in danger, God forbid, for nothing.
Okay, so this wind that gets stirred up causes a break in the service. Ramchal goes out. Of course, his disciples have been sworn to not leave the building, not leave the study hall at all. He goes out, and then when he comes back, he says, I'm calling it off. That's it. And don't anybody try to keep on doing this. No more. That's it. Messiah is not going to come from this worshiping that we have been doing. The service here is not just the worship service of this moment, but the whole process that has been going on. He's saying, no, we have to stop it and do not persist with doing it. Go ahead.
This dramatic event caused a crisis and aroused concerns and doubts among the fellowship. After the end of Yom Kippur, as well as for the first 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, every time they gathered together, they engaged in great weeping, saying that, as it seemed, they did not execute the service properly, although they had not felt any flaw in their entire order of service.
Okay, so everybody's feeling guilty, and they felt that wind was a kind of a message from heaven that stop messing with this. You guys are not worthy. You haven't done the right thing. And, so therefore, I'm not going to answer your prayers. So they are bewildered. They, with a whole heart, they had immersed themselves in this whole process, and they believed in whatever Ramchal was telling them to do. They believed in it completely, and they were yearning for the bringing of the Messiah. What did they do wrong? How is it that they messed up? Okay.
When Ramchal was asked in the course of the Simchat Beit HaShavuot,
Sho'eva.
the rejoicing of the eater drawing.
Should be water.
Water. For the meaning of the matter, he said to them with a joyful countenance, you did your service in the best possible way. And he explained that the reason for the thwarting of the plans was cosmic.
Okay. So he says, don't feel guilty. The Simchat Beit HaShoeva is during the days of Sukkot. Water was brought from the stream, from the Shiloach stream, and brought to the temple, and it was used as part of the temple service. So this is remembered even to this day, and it's a time of rejoicing during the whole holiday of Sukkot, which is supposed to be a holiday of joy. So he has a joyful countenance, and he's saying, look, it's time for us to be happy with what we have. We have a mitzvah here on Sukkot, Zman Simchatenu, time to be happy. Don't be sorrowful. Don't be crying. You've been crying all the way from Yom Kippur to Sukkot. No, stop being sad. It's not your fault. Go ahead.
You did your service in the best possible way, but you should know that on Yom Kippur there is a tumult in all the worlds, that on this day the Messiah would be revealed to Israel. And when this became known to Samael, the side of defilement, he trembled greatly and came before the heavenly court and asked them, what is this, that suddenly the matter is born for the coming of the Messiah? And they told him how I and you had performed the order of worship necessary for this during all the days of summer, and that our prayers and our service was accepted, so that he could do nothing about it, and the Messiah would be revealed to the world to redeem Israel.
Okay, so in fact, what the disciples were afraid of, it was the opposite of what they thought. That whole tumult, that whole uproar with the wind and so on, was actually the signal that the end of the life in this world as we know it was about to happen, and the Messiah was supposed to come and bring peace and rejoicing. And this was right at the very brink of actually doing everything that they had been working for. They did it beautifully. They succeeded in moving heaven and earth to be able to get to the Messiah to come. But now at that threshold, Samael, the other main character in the Joseph de la Reina story, Satan himself, is, freaking out. If Messiah comes, that's the end for Samael. That's the defeat of Samael. So here is where Samael now pulls his last card.
Then Samael demanded that the sage's pronouncement be fulfilled. that only one in a city or two, or only one in a city or two in a family would survive, based on Jeremiah.
Right.
And the
Sanhedrin
heavenly
111a, that's the Talmud, and it's based on a verse in Jeremiah.
Okay.
Okay, so what he was saying now, what was Samael saying? What Samael was saying is, okay, if you want to bring the Messiah now, fine. But we have, from other prophetic readings as well, the redemption doesn't come, just like in this kind of like rosy way. There's Armageddon, there's Gog and Magog, there's death and destruction and cataclysm and war and bloodshed and suffering, so that in the end, the final redemption will only apply to a few survivors, a couple of people, but the overwhelming majority of humanity will suffer terrible, pain and even death and destruction. That's the price. That is what will be entailed in bringing the Messiah. So Samael says, bring it on. Bring it on. If I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out in style. Let me go out there and let me create the havoc and the devastation that I enjoy so much. That's my bread and butter. Let me do it.
And the heavenly court said that he was entitled to claim this, but that the choice would be in the hands of Rabbi Moshe Chaim. So that
That's Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the Ramchal. This our rabbi here.
So that if he wished that the Messiah would arrive, even in this manner, then it would be so. But he would have to be given notice to that effect. Then, if he would insist that the Messiah arrive now, then only one in a city or two in a family would be left. So right before Musaf, Samael called me, and I did not want to stop. Only after Musaf did I leave to go outside, and Samael reported the matter to me. And I decided right then and there to cancel the whole thing, for I did not want in any way that I be the cause that the Messiah should arrive in this manner, leaving only one in a city or two in a family. Therefore, I personally annulled the whole matter, but not that, God forbid, that there was any flaw in your service.
That's his response. His response was, when I finally got to the actual follow through, the real consequences of this act, the consequences of bringing the redemption are so horrible that I opted to not do it. It was not worth bringing the Messiah if it meant that thousands and millions would have to die. So yes, you did the right thing. And we all hoped for the beautiful redemption that we pray for all the time. But then when it came down to the crunch, to the nitty gritty, it turned out that the price I judged to be too high. It was better to save all of these sad lives, these incomplete human beings, people who have failed, people who don't do the right thing, but nevertheless, to cause monumental global human suffering for the sake of the Messiah, I couldn't do it. So this is a kind of...
So the medicine was worse than the disease in his view.
That's right. That's what he's saying. And in a
which is an act of Rahmanas, which is a topic, I guess, that we're discussing.
Right. So yeah, exactly. This story is a kind of a mirror image, right? A reversal of the Joseph de la Reina story, right? Here, the compassion actually does again, in that sense, stop bringing the Messiah. It prevents bringing, the feet of Satan. On the other hand, it doesn't bring death and destruction, but it brings continued life and the continued possibility of human beings to make their lives better, to do tshuva, to repent, to do the right things and the good things that each one of us tries to do in our life. And let the Messiah come another time. Let the Messiah come when we can figure out other rules of the game, but not in this way. All right, we're going to stop with this one now. And I want to thank everybody and wish everybody as much as possible to have a hold on, where's there it is. Have a good Thanksgiving, one way or the other. And all
Thank
good things.
Same
Okay,
to you and Zelda and everybody else.
Thank you.